Thank you so much for that kind introduction. The next 12-15 minutes, I would be covering the military aspects of the Afghan army's capitulation, recent capitulation, and a small postmortem of how such a sudden capitulation could have occurred. That's what I would be looking to cover in my part of the presentation in the next 12 to 15 minutes. First, the question: why did the army disintegrate so quickly? It's $1 million question, a question which is in everyone's mind. On August 15, Taliban captured Kabul and declared the war in Afghanistan as over. The lightning speed with which the group made major territorial gains as the Afghan National Defense Security Forces retreated without putting up a fight shocked and surprised many the world over. In fact, a US intelligence assessment as late as 10th August predicted that Kabul could be surrounded in 90 days and maybe probably fall in 6 months. But how far from the reality actually it was. The US seemed to have concluded long ago that they lost the war in Afghanistan. But what they did not expect was the speed with which Kabul fell. Having lasted a superpower through 2 decades of war, 20 years down the lane, the Taliban is now back in Kabul even before 9/11, the declared date of US withdrawal. You may all seen the Taliban leadership structure on the TV. Most of it has been coming in the recent days. But what I would like to indicate or highlight is that many of them are UN declared terrorists who are now supposedly going to be the legitimate government or the legitimate organization which is going to run Afghanistan. The Taliban is now stronger in numbers than when they were ousted in 2001. Recent NATO estimates they add up to 85,000 full-time fighters, possibly boosted by new recruits and fresh arrivals from Pakistan. It's reported that Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, plus possibly Pak army personnel in disguise, and of course the various leadership elements from the Pak ISI. That the Taliban originated from Pakistan and its cadres are mostly from the madrasas of Pakistan is beyond doubt. Now, if you carry out a quick postmortem, the Taliban is on the brink of power after it entered the capital Kabul, capturing 26 out of the country's 34 provincial capitals. In fact, most of the provincial capitals in 10 days from 6th to 15th August 2021. In fact, they stepped up their campaign to defeat the Afghan government in May as the remaining US forces started to withdraw from the country. What Taliban actually carried out is typical guerrilla warfare. But the operational art that it displayed is much superior than its 1990 version. This sophisticated military strategy could not be that of the ragtag militia force that the Taliban was. The whole planning and execution must have been orchestrated, in my reckoning, by the Pak military, in particular the ISI. What they did? First, they captured outlying rural areas, then took control of important border crossings, thereby cutting off Kabul. Next, captured population centers to take control of provincial administration before launching their final assault on a weakened Kabul. The Blitzkrieg, if I can refer to it that way, went even better than the script. The Afghan National Defense and Security Forces who over the years had transformed themselves into a battle-hardened force, successfully facing up to the challenges posed by the Taliban, IS, and many other entities, just dissipated in the latest surge, utterly proving many analysts, including myself, wrong of their capacities and capabilities to fight. Then what went wrong? There are many theories. Only time will reveal the facts as and when it emerges, and if at all. Of course, it's easier to be wiser after the event. Even so, let me outline some speculations of why and or what went wrong. Over the last 20 years, the US spent more than $83 billion training, equipping and developing the Afghan National Army, police, Air Force and Special Forces. Yet under the advance of an armed group carrying light weapons, the ANDSF fell apart in a most bewildering fashion. But the script must go back to the Trump-Taliban deal, really speaking. It didn't start here, it must go back to the Trump-Taliban deal. I don't want to go into too many specifics, but suffice to say, the US Special Envoy held direct talks with the Taliban. In the first instance, did the envoy have to be an Afghan American who probably could have had conflict of interest? The talks then bypassed the legitimate Afghan government, signed an exit agreement without extracting any concession from the Taliban towards a political settlement. Not even a ceasefire was agreed to. US agreed to withdraw by 1st May 2021 in return of assurances from the Taliban that they would not let terrorist group operate from Afghan soil. The whole thing provided the Taliban a sense of victory while demoralizing the Afghan troops. And this was the beginning of the end game. In fact, during the war, it was the US air power which had dealt devastating blows to the insurgents. These reduced drastically after the Doha Agreement in return for the Taliban stopping attacks on American forces, allowing the Taliban to regroup and refurbish their supply lines. On 1st May, at the time of US withdrawal, the Afghan government had the provisional centers under their control, where they set up outposts which were provided supplies by air. That is the way they had disposed themselves on 1st May at the time of the US withdrawal. But when the Americans withdrew, they not only withdrew their support, but also the intelligence agents and contractors who were serving Afghan helicopters and warplanes. This grounded the Afghan Air Force mostly. The one clear superiority they had in the war over Taliban. Then the assassination of Afghan pilots by the Taliban, 7 of them added to the woes. I think this also could be as part of the Operation Art, the covert assassination campaigns of civil society leaders and prominent military leaders over the last 2 years carried out by the Taliban. With supply lines drying up, Taliban could easily overrun remote government outposts and sweep through the country's north, which was the epicenter of the anti-Taliban resistance in the 90s. The turning point, however, came on 6th August, when the first city, Zaranj, fell to the Taliban. They allowed the government troops to walk away if they surrendered with their equipment. As per reports, surrendered soldiers who were not paid for months were given pocket money by the Taliban. Those who resisted were killed. Often, their supporters left them without resupplies of ammunition, troops, and sometimes even food as they faced the advancing Taliban. So, Afghan troops lacking reinforcement and supplies faced 2 choices: either surrender and save their lives, or fight to death for a government who could not get their act together and abandoned by even the US. So, most chose the latter. Notwithstanding all that, there were certainly some inherent weaknesses within the Afghan government and the defense forces, the Afghan National Defense Security Forces. Let's have a look at what these and how these could have caused the downfall or capitulation. Firstly, there was widespread corruption in Afghan's defense and interior ministries, which is well known. where funds, ammunition, and food deliveries were stolen even before reaching the soldiers on ground. The ammunition and other equipment were sold in the black market, eventually ending up in the Taliban's hands. Some commanders embezzled money by submitting fund requests for the salaries of ghost soldiers, that is, soldiers who had not actually signed up for the military. As this was happening, ANDSF personnel were kept unpaid and retained on duty without permission to leave and see their families for months. This must have affected their morale considerably. The embezzlement and corruption undermined morale within the ranks of the army. The integrity of senior leadership is pivotal in military affairs to win the troops' respect and loyalty, which all of us who have served in the army or are serving in the armed forces will well vouch for. For unpaid soldiers, the lavish lifestyle of their commanders were often too much to swallow or digest. Hence, instead of fighting and dying, they preferred to save their lives by surrendering to the Taliban under its amnesty offers. There was no ideological cohesion within the army or a sense of national duty and belonging. Afghan soldiers were not ready to fight and die to defend President Ashraf Ghani or the government. Conspiracy theories about a secret deal between the Afghan government and Taliban were rife among the Afghan troops. And of course, there were reports Ghani to be carrying huge bag loads of dollars when he flew out. Then there was the continuous political interference and reshuffling of office holders as high as interior and defense ministers, governors and police chiefs, which also affected the ANDSF's battlefield performance. An army needs unity of command and leadership, continuity to function properly and fight effectively on the battlefield. The military chief of staff is the center of gravity of his organization, and if he is changed consistently, it adversely affects the organization. President Ghani regularly changed his military leaders amid the US withdrawal and the Taliban's offensive across Afghanistan. For instance, Ghani replaced the Afghan army chief who was appointed in June with the Afghan National Army Special Operational Command, Major General Alizai. Similarly, he replaced the interior ministers twice and reshuffled his defense minister and 6 corps commanders in recent months. Such moves do not help the army's cohesion at all. Then the Taliban's smart military strategy of taking control of major border crossings, firstly the rural areas, then the major border crossings, main highways and besieging the big cities, crippled Kabul's ability to send reinforcements and supplies. Many army units were cut off from the rest of the country and thus were forced to either flee across the border into neighboring countries or to just dissipate. Despite receiving years of training and billions of dollars worth of equipment, the ANDSF never developed the capacity to stand on its own. In fact, it was entirely dependent on the US and NATO troops to protect urban areas. Once these forces began to withdraw, there was no barrier to stop the advance of the Taliban, and the weaknesses and incompetence that was covered up by the foreign military presence quickly came to the fore. It appears that the US Army trained the wrong kind of army, a Western-styled army, when it needed to train an army capable of fighting the Taliban, a guerrilla warfare fighting capability. US and NATO failed to invest in factories to make spare parts, manufacturing plants to produce ammunition and training to produce skilled Afghan mechanics. So when they left, they were left high and dry. Every bullet had to come from America, when this could have as well been made in Afghanistan. The collapse of the ANDSF, even before the US withdrawal, was completed, and the way the gains of the so-called war on terror have been reversed will reverberate for years to come. The thousands of Afghan fighters freed with the Taliban from the Bagram air base and many other jails, including those from Al-Qaeda, IS and other groups, will pose a major security challenge in the region for period to come, and we have to wait and watch what will be the effect of this huge presence of terrorists within Afghanistan. Now, where does India stand? India's ties with Afghanistan was guided by the Strategic Partnership Agreement of 2011. Of course, now it's history. Thus far, India has given 4 Mi-35 attack helicopters to Afghanistan, 4 Mi-35 repaired and refurbished by Belarus, and 3 Cheetah helicopters. All of this will be now under Taliban control. Anyway, as I mentioned, this agreement is now history. At this point, when the future power structure in Afghanistan is still not clear, but which in all likelihood will be Taliban dominated, India is in a very tight security situation. India's options are very limited, not having established any worthwhile livings with Taliban and put all its eggs in the Afghan government basket. That policy was of course good up to a point, and which no doubt had its justification. Now, if you draw an assessment of the situation as it stands, a negotiated power sharing agreement looks unlikely, though some signals to that effect are seen. But I think these are smokescreen at best to avoid international backlash and obtain recognition for now, to obtain legitimacy for the oppression and terror that will follow for sure. India will have no option but to wait and watch how Taliban 2.0 evolves. If the parameters of civility and governance are observed, and Taliban also reaches out to India, all of which are very unlikely and doubtful, then India may as well develop its ties with the new dispensation in Afghanistan. If not, which could be more likely, India will have to seriously look at other options. First and foremost, it must be wary of terror strikes and increased militancy in J&K. Was the ceasefire on the LOC a smokescreen by Pakistan to concentrate on its western borders as also save its military resources in order to support the Taliban? Indian military strategists need to apply themselves and do course correction if required. International pressure should be drummed up against Pakistan and Taliban to clearly convey that such a regime is illegitimate and be treated as a pariah state. We hold the presidency of the UN Security Council at this critical moment and should not fritter away this opportunity by just holding meetings on maritime security and peacekeeping, etc. India is also pushed into a corner should China, Pakistan, Taliban be on the same page, which as of now is more or less a distinct possibility. All in all, the future for India does not look good at all, does not augur well. India will have to tread very, very carefully. Finally, should the Taliban take control and it doesn't prove its worth as a 2.0 Taliban that it is projecting, options of supporting resistance movement by various tribal leaders and warlords like Abdul Rashid Dostum and Atta Muhammad Noor, who appears to be reviving the now defunct Northern Alliance, needs to be seriously considered. The latest call by VP Saleh, the Vice President, to carry on the resistance from Panjshir should also be on your table for active consideration. We all know Saleh is a tiger to the core with courage and conviction. So these are the main options which we have, but as of now, it has to wait and watch and see how the situation develops. That's all. Thank you very much.